All right, everyone. I think we have plenty of time to go around. So I'm Theresa, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to come here and speak about myself and my business. They tell you that everyone likes to talk about themselves, but I think every business owner likes to talk about their business. At least I do. So I'm going to talk about my business, how it got started, my background, which is probably vastly different than yours. So I'm going to be very transparent about that. What the potential markets are and some industry statistics. So I want to start by telling you the number one question that's asked when I say I own an interpreting and translation company is, how many languages do you speak? As if I speak 400. So I'm fluent in 2 languages, that's all, don't be impressed. English and actually American Sign Language is my background. And I emphasize American Sign Language because sign language is not universal. There's German Sign Language, French Sign Language, Russian Sign Language, which a lot of people don't realize. And also emphasize that I'm an interpreter, not a translator. And it's always amazing to me on national news how they interpose those 2 terms. They'll say the translator who's standing next to the speaker and signing. So translators translate on paper or media, and interpreters spoken language, or sign language, spoken language. So the next question I get asked, I'm probably going to hit this by mistake. Next question I get asked is, how did you get involved in linguistics and how did you start your business? So talk about my backstory a little bit here. Let's see if I can get this. Do I point it somewhere particular?
Before, I think you have some actions.
Okay, so I'm sure my personal backstory is very different from most people here. I did grow up in a very small town. It was, I used to call it a milky white town. I never knew anybody of color, never knew anyone that spoke a different language. It was a town of 25,000 people in rural upstate New York, very upstate by Syracuse. Go Orangemen. That might be how you know where I come from. I grew up in a very loving home with 2 amazing parents, stay-at-home mom, dad was a hard worker, and had a very sheltered life until I was about 15. And the year that I turned 15, tragedy struck my life in several different directions. And I found myself out on my own, out of school, and had to support myself with, basically, I had a middle school education. And at that point, I like to call that period in my life was faking it till you made it. So back then, which is, I'm going to age myself all over this presentation. But back then, you didn't have to show ID to get a job or on a job application. So I put on a lot of makeup, put my hair up, walked in and said, just graduated high school, need a job as a waitress, need a job as a receptionist, whatever. And I worked several jobs to support myself until I was probably 21-ish. And I found myself working as a receptionist in a car dealership. So I had family that were in the business. I'm sure that's probably how I got the job. But I was working as a receptionist, and there was a bookkeeper there. We sold Porsches, Audis, and Saabs. So that ages me a little bit. The bookkeeper became very ill and couldn't do her job. So the owner bought in his CPA to train me how to do payroll, do financial statements, and close the car deals. So I started to learn a lot about accounting, a lot about finances of a business through him. And fast forward a few more months, the bookkeeper was gravely ill and wasn't going to come back at all. So back then, Porsche had a business management training program that you could apply to and go through, which is what I did, and became actually a business manager for Porsche. So I was this little 20-something driving around like this 936 demo and thought I was all that and a bag of chips. So but I learned a lot about business, and I was really excited to be becoming educated. I finished my high school degree on the side, and now I had this training from Porsche. So so from there, fast forward from there, I was doing that until probably I was in my early 30s, and then I became very ill and had to take a year off for treatments. I had 2 little boys, and my big concern was I was very scared. What if I didn't make it through this illness? And all I could think of is I don't want my kids to grow up thinking that their mother's uneducated or stupid. So I decided I had to go to college, and I had to get at least an undergrad degree. So I had been taking sign language classes through our church, and I applied through a program at NTID, which is National Technical Institute for the Deaf at RIT in Rochester. And I started driving back and forth and taking classes there, and fast-tracked my degree, because God forbid that these kids' mother would die and she would be stupid or wouldn't have a college degree, not thinking about they wouldn't have a mother. So I finished, got my degree, and then I had to do something because I was healthy and I didn't die. So it was either go back to the car business or start freelancing as an interpreter. So I did that for about 10 years. And I was from a very buttoned up, let's see if I can get this to. So I was from a very buttoned up corporate background of Porsche. And they used to say in the training, if you can afford it, it's a Porsche. If you can't, it's a Porsche. And everybody wore a white shirt, and everybody was buttoned up, men or women. And so now I'm in this field where I'm interpreting. I'm in courtrooms, I'm in hospitals, I'm traveling all over New York State. And I'm seeing such gaps in the industry and things that were really upsetting. As an interpreter, what I saw was I'm working through several agencies. Most of them were like human service agencies, and I never knew when I was going to get paid. Sometimes I didn't know who the people were that I was going to be working with. I saw that there was this huge lack of vetting of interpreters, and the straw that broke the camel's back was when I walked into a courtroom to team with another interpreter for a hearing, and I walked in my suit and I had my portfolio in case I was bought-eared, and my team came in from another agency in flip-flops and jeans, and the judge would not let her into the well of the court. So out of my frustration and seeing what was needed is really how the business started. I was getting a lot of calls, and I really think because I had that background of business and the professionalism, I had taken names of 6 colleagues that I really trusted that were very professional and very skilled interpreters. And I had put them in my day timer. So I'm dating myself again because it was the day timers. And every time somebody would call and ask me for a job, if I was busy, because I was booked up months in advance, I'd give them one of those names. And that little card got very dog-eared, and I laminated it. And one day I was in my dad's, and he was watching this, getting the phone calls, giving the names, getting the phone calls, giving the names. And he took the card and he said, "You do realize there's value in this card, right? People are calling for you because they know that you have that degree of professionalism and skill, and you're giving them these other names, but you should be hiring these people under you, and you should start your own business. You've already said there's this big gap of professionalism in the field." And I was like, "Oh my God, Dad, are you kidding me? I can't start a business. Who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm this kid that was, on her own at 15 years old, and just street smarts. That's all I have is street smarts." Well, a few months later, my dad tragically died very quickly from a brain tumor at 69. And I was pretty devastated. My kids were in college. I was an empty nester, and I thought I just needed to do something different. So I started the business. And within 6 months, I had moved it out of my home, hired my first employee, and it was just like crazy taking off. In 2003 is when I started the business. In 2005, I realized that I needed to hire another person to come in and help me. And the young woman that I hired right out of college said, we're getting calls for Spanish interpreting and French interpreting, and what about a spoken language department? And I said, I give you my blessing and autonomy to start a spoken language department if you want. So we added in 2005 a spoken language component, which today is 40% of what we do. In 2008, we added a translation department because people were calling to get documents translated, websites translated, to be able to reach new markets. And in 2010, we added on a telephonic platform where a doctor's office, for example, can call, say, I need a Spanish interpreter. They get on the phone and then they can make phone calls to patients. So I'm sorry. I'm nervous and my mouth is very dry. So who are we today? So talk a little bit about who we are today and where the industry is. Okay. So this is who we are today. Today we employ hundreds of interpreters in thousands of different languages and have a very diverse customer base. One thing I learned from business management and training was to have a diverse customer base and not depend on one customer, which I think has really saved us. So I say that we do from preschool to the UN. So we are in New York State. That's where I'm from. I moved to Philadelphia 5 years ago to kind of stalk my kids because they moved away from Syracuse and they weren't coming home. So I said, fine, I'll just come stalk you and live in Philadelphia. So I'm still running the business from here, but here's some of our customers. You can see that there's just a big, broad range of who we provide services for. It can be the dentist down the street who has an Arabic patient that needs an interpreter once in 10 years, or it can be somebody like Syracuse University or Cornell or some of the colleges that we provide services for every day. So what is the language industry? Some statistics are that the global language service market was valued 2 years ago at 49.6 billion, and it has risen to the 56.18 billion in 2021, which is a huge growth rate in just the past 2 years. I don't believe that this was just because of COVID, but certainly helped because we had to, so many things had to be translated into different languages. But as you can see from 2009 here, it's a very fast growing industry. Some interesting statistics are that Europe owns half of the global language service market at 49%, and North America at 39%. Does anyone want to guess what the top 3 languages spoken are? Because people usually get this wrong. Maybe you'll know. So what do you think the top 3 languages spoken are in the world? Mandarin's number 2. No. Number 1's English. Number 2 is Mandarin, and number 3 is Hindi. It's interesting. The top 3 used most widely on the internet that we see being translated for marketing, especially in a lot of social media, are English, Chinese, and Spanish. So Spanish comes in. So also another market that gets vastly overlooked is the deaf population. So there are over 360 million people across the globe. That's a huge market that gets untapped. And there are currently more than 7,000 spoken languages. Those are actually dwindling down each year because there's some dialects, some very rare dialects. People aren't using the language and they just unfortunately disappear. But here are the languages that are spoken the most. They're very different from the ones that we're really targeting for marketing. So most requested in my particular company are the on-site interpreters for medical facilities, both spoken and sign language. For education, there's a huge market for sign language interpreters for students that are deaf. We do everything from preschool to post-secondary. And then website and social media has become kind of the hot thing lately with everything from TikTok to Twitter to Instagram being translated. Talk a little bit about globalization versus localization. Localization is really what we want to do when we offer our local markets a service or a product. And it's really much more than just translation. There are cultural nuances that have to be considered. When we translate a website, we have to take into consideration everything from the colors that might be used, to the clothing that might be used, to the time zones that we're trying to hit. And it's a very complex and timely process. Some people I've seen take their websites and just go to Google Translate and put the Google Translate across the top. I wouldn't do that if I were you. It can come out gobbledygook. I'm sure that you all saw the sign language interpreter that was supposed to be a sign language interpreter that stood next to our president, Obama, and they found out that he was a murderer. He didn't know sign language. I was sitting at home watching this going, what is this guy? He was just flailing his arms around and meant nothing. I mean, and at the time, my phone's blowing up because all my sign language interpreters are like, well, who is this guy? He's standing next to the president and all these other world leaders. No one had vetted him. Much like when I was in the field as a sign language interpreter, I got calls from agencies and said, I heard that you know sign language. Here's a 1099. How much do you charge? I was going into schools for the deaf and interpreting for kids that had been abused sexually and physically by people there that didn't have any, the people they were bringing in to be interpreters, they weren't checking their backgrounds. They weren't saying, are they on the sex offender registry? Do they have a criminal record? Obviously, no one checked this guy that stood next to our president. And he was this close to him. Now, I interpreted for Hillary Clinton years ago and George Pataki and some other politicians. Trust me, I was checked. I had a background check done before. I had my umbrella taken in the pouring rain because somebody thought I was going to hit Hillary over the head with it, I guess. But so, you know, we all were vetted. We had to show our certifications. And this guy was, so this happens a lot. It also happens if you want to use free translation software. So just be careful about that. Translating your website into these following languages enables you to reach 80% of the online purchasing power globally. So this is really important statistics for our customers are looking to reach new markets. I always find it fascinating to me what these top languages are, never what I would really expect, but the markets are definitely there. Apologize, I have to keep going through my notes because I couldn't put them on the screen. I'm a Mac user. It doesn't always translate like Keynote into PowerPoint. So here are the top 10. So we talked about the importance of my business of what it was built on. So it was built on the professionalism I saw lacking. It was built on the vetting of the interpreters, also supporting of the interpreters. My interpreters get paid. They know when they're going to get paid. They know exactly what they're going to get paid. We have developed our own proprietary software where they can go in and see everything about every assignment. So they know where they're going, who the consumer is, where to park. Everything is right there for them. I never had that as an interpreter myself. So we're getting the best of the best, but they also have to be vetted for certifications. People know that when they get on site, they're going to have clear, concise, accurate communication. So if you want to go on the cheap and go to Google Translate or one of the other free translation programs, this is what you're most likely going to get. So we have Sunbucks Coffee, which I love to go to. And of course, you don't want to shoplift in Asia because you'll be prostituted. The one in India, I don't know if you can read it, but it says eating carpets are strictly prohibited. This is an airport that actually used free translation software. And in China, the food is guaranteed not to cause pregnancy. So that's good to know. The one that's my favorite and the one that was talked about most in our industry was the one in Mexico. That was the Got Milk campaign. And these billboards all went up the same day, the same time, all over Mexico. And they were very offended, and they had to really pull back that whole campaign. So it's amazing to me that places like KFC would not have professionals, but they did it next to our president. So, you know, you can eat your fingers off in China. And just a few more, just because I find this, it's hysterical, but it's also disturbing because there are attorneys here, MDs here. If you don't have someone that understands the terminology in both languages for medical, a person could die. And I've seen that happen. Or in a courtroom where something could be interpreted incorrectly, can determine whether someone goes to jail or not. So it's funny, but it's not. And interpreters and translators need to be vetted. The bar needed to be raised. In New York State, we were the first agency ever to do background checks on our interpreters. I mean, just criminal and sex offender. We do health screenings. We do drug testing. We make sure that people have certifications and college degrees. It's not just someone bilingual who just walks in. All the time I get calls. Oh, I know Spanish really well. So do you have a degree in interpreting or any, training in translation? Well, no, but I know Spanish really well because I grew up and my best friend was Spanish, and they think that they can be an interpreter. And there are a lot of my competitors that will hire them. So here's a few more. So you don't want to take your kids to the racist park and or eat soup for sluts. And that was an international campaign. My favorite is the execution of progress. Like, okay. And then there's the manicure set that I hope that the girl in my salon doesn't use. So one of the other things about Google Translate is that, they use AI and all of the information is mined that they're translating for you. So if you have any kind of sensitive documents, just know that they're not protected, that they're all being mined. And the reason they do that is because they're trying to learn and improve the translation software. So that if they keep seeing a translation over and over and over, then they'll start spitting that to the top and say, that must be the accurate translation. So just to circle back to the beginning, I think that when you see a need in the market and you realize what's lacking, to fill that need can really not only build your business but it can change people's lives. I feel like if I closed my business tomorrow and just walked away, I feel very proud of the fact that we have raised the bar in our field of interpreting in New York State, and that when people do call us, they are getting the accurate translation or interpretation. So the customer service for everyone, our customers that write and pay the bills, our interpreters who are out there working, interpreting, my staff who's working in their offices that are booking the jobs and signing contracts with people and taking care of all of them. And most important, the quality of the interpretation that's happening. So people understand that when they have an interpreter on site, they're not a criminal, they're healthy, they have a certification, they have errors and omissions insurance, which the attorneys will tell you is really important, that you want to make sure no one else mandates their interpreters have that except for us. So I really appreciate, again, being invited here and your attention and listening to me speak about what I love most, which is my company. So thank you very much.